All right, welcome everybody to the Science of Science Fiction. My name is Rufus Cochran. I am the founder and executive director of Indiana Sciences. It's exactly 7. What we're going to do is take a couple of minutes here to let people roll in. Then we're going to do some introductions of our speakers for tonight. And then we are going to give a brief overview and then just launch into the fun. So I just want to say thank you all so much for joining us. This is a great crowd. Hope you're having a really good Gen Con online. I know the virtual is different for all of us. Not being able to bump into people in the convention hall is a good and a bad thing. So hoping you guys have had some good programming and had the chance to hopefully learn a lot today from the events and from the games. So we're just going to give everybody a couple of minutes here to load in, probably at 7:03 or 4, maybe even 5 if we get lucky. And then we'll go ahead and start. So we officially hit 100 people are in. Super excited by that number. Super happy to have so many people joining us tonight. And we'll give everybody just a minute or two to get loaded in, and then we'll get started. So in this kind of minute or two, what I'll do is, if you see sharing the screen here, we are Indiana Sciences. We are a nonprofit based in Indianapolis that does science communication and advocacy. This is a project that is near and dear to our heart, the science of science fiction. We do this at conventions throughout Indianapolis throughout the year. So Indy PopCon, which you may have gone to, Starbase Indy, which is a very awesome Star Trek convention for all Star Trek fans out there. And then the biggest and our favorite is here at Gen Con. And so we are very thankful to have you with us tonight. If you enjoy the presentation, you're enjoying the show, the speakers, please follow us on social media at Indiana Sciences, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Twitch. If you have friends that you think, oh man, they would love this kind of stuff, or you didn't get a ticket in time, we'll also be live streaming this on our Twitch and our YouTube. So check those out, follow those if you get the chance. So we've got a couple more people rolling in. We'll give it until 7:03, 7:04 before we get started. I'll just do a quick pitch here. I know most of these presentations, there's a game or a book or a thing being sold. We're just a local nonprofit. We don't have a bunch of stuff to sell. I know some of our speakers from tonight and tomorrow have books. Those are definitely worth picking up. And there are a lot of nonprofits and a lot of aid groups doing stuff during this coronavirus pandemic. And I would highly suggest donating to one of those. And so we are breaking 110 people. We are rolling up on 7:05 to get started. We'll take just another minute or two to let everybody get in here, and then we'll get started. And just want to say thank you all so much for joining us. This is a fantastic turnout Thursday night. Really great to see all of you, and really hope you're enjoying the convention so far. And for everybody who pinged us for the Zoom link, asking for it in the event registration, thank you for pinging us, because it took us a little bit to figure out how to get all the information in there. So rolling up on 7:05 here, and we'll formally kick it off then. But just want to say a couple of housekeeping things. Follow us on Indiana Sciences if you enjoy the presentation. Also, check back in tomorrow at 7 for our second panel, because we will have 3 new scientists and engineers that will be doing their presentation. And it is a fantastic and fun presentation that I think that you guys will really enjoy. Um, we can fit, I think, 250 people in the Zoom. So definitely swing by tomorrow and join us for that. So it is 7:05. It's time for some science. I've kind of talked long enough, right? So I'll do a formal kind of intro, an overview, and then I'll kick it over to our speakers. We've got three amazing speakers for you tonight in our panel. A little bit of housekeeping. Please stay muted. You don't have to turn off your camera. We love seeing your beautiful faces. If you're wearing a costume, give a big thumbs up. I'm wearing my ugly science sweater for the day. So if you've got it, represent it. My name is Rufus Cochran. I am the executive director of Indiana Sciences. We are a small nonprofit based here in Indianapolis that does science communication and education. We do programs like this at conventions and different events throughout the city. And our whole goal really with these presentations are to hopefully provide a little bit of education, but really to just invoke a little bit of wonder and hopefully give you that spark that no matter what age you are, no matter where you're at in your life, that little spark to just learn something else, to just kind of dig in a little bit more and learn a little bit more about the natural world around you. So hopefully, if you're going through the presentation and you have one of those like, whoa moments, hit the reaction button, give like the thumbs up or the clap or something for the speakers. They really will enjoy that. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our speakers for the evening. A really awesome lineup for you today. Our first speaker will be James Reed, the director of the anatomy laboratory at the Giesel School of Medicine. And he, looking at your Twitter, James, you are a licensed funeral director, for which I am fascinated to learn more about from Dartmouth. And next we have Jason Organ, Professor James Reed. Jason Organ is the Associate Professor of Anatomy and Cell Biology and Physiology at the IU School of Medicine. Fantastic science communicator, does a lot with us, and his talk is actually absolutely fantastic, especially if you're from Indiana and you know about Der Pretzelwagen. I'm gonna do a little teaser. You're gonna love this talk, right? And then finally, Matt Sowers, the lead mechanical engineer at Radius Innovation and Development, holds several patents at biomedical and handheld technology companies throughout Indiana. Really wealth of knowledge. Really happy to have these three speakers here. And tonight's theme is going to be fantasy, monsters, D&D, traps and physics. A lot's going to be discussed, and we've just asked that you hold your questions until the end. We've got time set aside for questions, and we're going to love to get all those from you. If you have questions throughout the presentation, type them into the chat. I'll be going through those, and we'll kind of aggregate those and get those to our speakers. And for everybody on the live stream, you can do the same in the Twitch or the YouTube. I'll be monitoring those and we'll aggregate those questions. So that's my brief 5-minute intro. Thanks again. We've got over 120 people in here tonight. This is a fantastic opportunity. James, if you want, I will turn the baton over to you and we'll share your screen and we'll get started.
Perfect. I will grab the clicker from you. I'm virtually grabbing the slide advancer. And I will share my screen. How's everyone doing while I do things? Can everyone hear me? Awesome. Continue desktop. All right, there you can see yourselves, and we'll start off this slideshow. So I'm here to talk about cryptids. And when I first got this call, I was like, oh, I'll talk about cryptids. And I went to put this presentation together, but I didn't really put like a ton of effort into the title. I mean, as you can see, it's just cryptids right here. And I was like, well, this is like a sciencey talk. It deserves a sciencey name. So I was like looking at what I'm going to talk about, and I was like, okay, ooh, the anthropology of cryptozoology. I was like, well, a sciencey talk deserves a subtitle, but I couldn't think of one. So we'll go with this. Tonight, I am going to approach the topic of cryptids using an anthropological framework. Yeah, everyone's really excited and with me still. Anthropology is the study of humanity, specifically their evolution and culture, but I'm going to do it in like a fun way. I promise that I will not mention the hegemony of Yeti culture, and I will not explore the internal and external culture of Jersey Devils using a post-processual approach. I promise I will not do that, and that is probably the last jargon I'm going to use today. But what I am going to talk about is how these awesome creatures have kind of woven their way into our folklore and changed over time. But we have to like start out by saying, what is a cryptid? So first off, cryptids are cool. I mean, look at these things. They're huge. They are enigmatic. They are the markers of the edge of the map. So when you see, here there be monsters, there they are. They are also the things that capture our imagination and warn us about the consequences of venturing too far from normal station. Well, there's a lot of justified criticism about this person's scientific techniques. I think Bernard Hovelman's definition of a cryptid is pretty good. He states a cryptid must contain one trait that is truly singular, striking, emotionally upsetting, and thus capable of mythification. Right? That kind of states it all. And now that we've defined what a cryptid is, let's talk about how they've worked their way into our culture and how they change over the time. So we're going to see how to become a modern cryptid in just 3 easy steps. And we're going to use 2 subjects as a test case the entire way through this. Many of the most well-known cryptids that you can think of began as figures in an indigenous culture. And while there is tons of variation in each culture, they tend to kind of serve as a being that's tasked with protecting something. And it has to be stated that it's either protecting it for or from that culture. They're not all like super good at the beginning, but some are. So I think you can see my mouse here. I'm hovering over a mask from the Lenape culture, which originally lived in the area that now consists of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York. And like you can tell from my hat, this is my area. I grew up with this mask kind of all over the place. Their culture included these mask figures they called Misingwi, and they acted as a keeper of game animals in their hunting grounds. And then over to the right, hopefully the zoom isn't cutting it off, but you can see a creature from the Highland Nepalese culture. Specifically, what we're going to talk about is its use in Sherpa culture. And we do have to note that Sherpa are a people, not a profession. But this is the Meto Kangmi, or as most of us know as the Yeti. And the Yeti were known for protecting sacred peaks, but they were a lot less important in these cultures than we in the West like to kind of give them credit for. If everyone's been to Walt Disney World, you've seen how important the Yeti is to Nepalese culture, but they've overblown it just a little bit. So now like we've established how these creatures kind of begin their lives in folklore. And now we're going to move on to colonialism. So step 2 is to be co-opted into a colonial European morality tale. And especially in North America, strict religious and governmental hierarchy was imposed to make sure that the community survived. Now, it does have to be noted that those communities didn't try to like adapt to their local environments, but they just impose these moral and governmental structures on their people. But that's probably a conversation for another day. Now, in the same order, we have the popular depiction of the Jersey Devil. So this is a combination of those Masingwe masks mixed with like demonic interpretations from European folklore. And the story goes that a woman in Leeds, New Jersey, while giving birth to her 13th child, and I'm assuming that is foundational, that it is the 13th child, exclaimed, "Let this one be a devil." And it was, because the story would just kind of end there if it wasn't. Um, and this kind of kept children in line, and it really kept them from like wandering off into the Pine Barrens, because I don't really think I would want to see this. Now, interestingly, this actual sketch was done after a version of the Jersey Devil that was shown in Philadelphia. But that was actually a kangaroo that a group of guys took from the Buffalo Zoo, painted striped black and white, attached wings to it, and would poke it with a stick that had a nail attached to it to get it to jump and scream and stuff. So, you know, not great, but you can see how this is kind of becoming more of a morality tale and not this like protector spirit. And then on the right, we have the Yeti, which morphed into the abominable snowmen. And I kind of grew up watching like Bugs Bunny cartoons and Daffy Duck cartoons with the abominable snowman that is just kind of coming out of the tundra and doing something. Um, Now, that name came from British explorer C.K. Howard Bury, who reported seeing something while surveying Everest. And he kind of asked his Sherpa guide what that was. And the guide responded, Metu Kongme. But he wrote it down as Metach or Mech Kongme. So that changed the name from wild man to filthy man. And that's where the abominable part of abominable snowmen come. And this is like the beginning of that big hairy man trope that we just love to throw in modern cryptid folklore. Most areas that have woods have a sighting of their local big hairy man. And also, because this is so closely linked to colonialism, uh, this is an effort to create an other in the wilderness that is just human enough to be transposed onto some of the more remote indigenous cultures, which is like super depressing to think about when you're riding the Matterhorn or the Expedition Everest roller coaster next time. So, you know, think about everything as we're all thinking about everything now. Now, the final form of turning into what we would consider a modern cryptid is commodification and marketing. And side note, apparently, like the NHL kind of has a thing for cryptids. You can see our Jersey Devil has morphed into the mascot for the New Jersey Devils, and our Yeti is serving as the mascot for the Colorado Avalanche. Although I think they changed it to a squirrel, which is way less cool, and I don't know what they were thinking, but you know, it's what we have. And this is how probably all of us interact with cryptids, right? Like every local area has their cryptids, which is like welcoming you to that area. I live in Vermont, and patrolling Lake Champlain, we have our friendly champ. I know I am in virtual Indiana right now, but Indiana has plenty of these cryptids as well. You have the Meshek and Lake Manitou, and you have a group of little gnomish, goblinish, it depends on if you're on their good or bad side, apparently, creatures called the Pukwudgie, which live in Madison County in Mounds State Park. I think it's Mound State Park, right? Sure. We'll go with that. So now, based on what I've been saying and kind of the tone I've been taking about cryptids, you've probably guessed that I skew towards the skeptical side when it comes to things like Bigfoot, and the Loch Ness Monster. But there are plenty of cryptids that have been proven by scientific evidence. And it turns out things like the kraken is the giant squid, and these like crazy sea serpents from mythology, like Yorman. I'm not going to try and say the rest of that because there's lots of consonants in a row. Like the Leviathan. They are something called the oarfish. And if I have time at the end of this, I'll share my screen and show you pictures of these because they're pretty cool. But I want to finish off here with a creature that is totally real but extinct, and you can see it on my screen right now. But it is possible that this creature could have accounted for at least a portion of some of the lore we've talked about. So this, as you can see by my strategically placed title, is the Gigantopithecus. And this is an ancestor of modern orangutans that lived in China and Southeast Asia a really long time ago. And there is some debate, there's a lot of debate around this. It's not like the most understood of things on the evolutionary timeline of primates that we know about, but we know enough to kind of make some assumptions. So it's likely that this animal came in at over 9 feet and 600 pounds. There are some estimations that it was taller than 12 feet. There are some estimations that think that it was probably a little bit shorter than 9 feet. Even at its shortest estimation, it's still a lot bigger than I would want to encounter ever. Um, a lot of upright bipedally like we do, so upright on 2 feet, but it most likely moved around more like a gorilla, which you can see here. So that's something called knuckle walking, where you're walking on all fours and you're using your hands and feet equally. But it was still able to like stand upright, just like an orangutan would. There's also some debate as to when this went extinct, but there's some pretty good evidence that suggests that it could have, and I'm hedging my bets so much here because the fossil record's pretty incomplete, but it could have briefly overlapped with humans, as you can see here. And since it's done in such great detail, it must be true. So for this thought experiment, we're going to assume that it is. Now, a lot of cryptid hunters would make a leap right now and state like, well, obviously some of these existed further into the future, and this is what is responsible for the Yeti and the big feet, Bigfoots, bi- the large hairy man trope, right? And I am not suggesting that. I am absolutely not suggesting. I am unequivocally saying that that did not happen. But I can't deny, even with my skeptical mind, that if this, motioning with my hand that you can't see, if this scene happened, the person that would just have stumbled across Gigantopithecus would have definitely experienced something that was unexpected, paradoxical, striking, and emotionally upsetting, thus making Gigantopithecus worthy of mythification. And if that person was me, he would not have shut up about it for the rest of his life. So I am absolutely not prepared to submit the humble Gigantopithecus as evidence for Bigfoot or the Yeti, but I do see the possibility of this creature entering into our folklore and capable of traveling through time and space to this very moment. So, to this person who stumbled upon Gigantopithecus and lived to tell the tale, we salute you. So, the next time, and I will finish here, the next time you're wandering through the woods and you stumble upon a large creature just at the end of your vision, outside your view, I want to tell you that you probably did not find evidence of Bigfoot. I'm sorry. But you've probably found our elusive cryptid subtitle, The Anthropology of Cryptozoology, subtitled, It's Probably a Bear. So that is my talk. I think I've made it under the time limit. I think I've given you your screen back.
Yes, sweet. Let me turn video back on. Thank you so much, James. That was absolutely fantastic. I love the shout out to Mound State Park. I saw a couple people, yay Anderson, Madison County there, and in the chat. So what we'll do now is we will turn it over to Jason Organ. If you have questions for James and his talk, toss them into the chat, and we will get those compiled for the end. Looking through the chat, saw some questions, some quick housekeeping stuff. Tomorrow's panel will be a completely different panel of scientists. It will be zombie themed. You'll want to check it out. It's a great talk. We have a lot of really good experts. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jason Organ to turn his screen. And this is a fun part of the talk, so enjoy this.
All right. Can you guys see my screen? I hope so. Is that good, Rufus? Can you see it? All right. Okay, so this right here, so my name is Jason Organ. As Rufus said, I'm an associate professor of anatomy, cell biology, and physiology at the Indiana University School of Medicine. One of the things that I do, in addition to teaching anatomy and advising students and running a research lab, is communicate with the public about science. And so today I want to tell you a little story about Wookiees. And the reason I want to talk about Wookiees is because of this food truck that normally parks itself right on Georgia Avenue, right outside of Gen Con. It also happens to park itself usually in front of my office building, which is why I love it. But nevertheless, it is a fantastic food truck because they serve sandwiches on pretzel buns and they are just absolutely delicious. And in particular, they serve a sandwich. Actually, several of their sandwiches are actually named after Star Wars aspects of Star Wars. So they have a sandwich called the Ham Solo, for example. But the one that I particularly like is the Chewbacca. So the Chewbacca looks like that. It's fantastic. Roast beef, some cheese, some Funyuns. Who doesn't love Funyuns on a sandwich, right? Some horseradish. It's just an absolutely delicious sandwich to eat. And because I'm a nerd, one day while I was eating my Chewbacca, I thought to myself, I wonder how Chewbacca would eat a Chewbacca. So now I'm letting you in a little bit as to the constant struggle that's going on in my head. So sorry to burden you with that, but I had to share because it's too much for me alone. But I wondered, how would Chewbacca eat a Chewbacca sandwich? And the reason I asked that question is that Chewbacca is thought to have, at least according to Wikipedia, is thought to have originated from inspiration from a dog or perhaps from a primate. And if Chewbacca is more like a dog, Chewbacca would eat and swallow in one way, his own Chewbacca sandwich. And if he was a primate, like us, he would eat it in a different way. And he would chew and swallow in a different way. And so I thought, well, clearly there's something to be thought of here. This is a thought experiment that is absolutely worth pursuing. And so the way that you can think about these things is through the idea of shared traits. So we know that evolution happens through speciation events. And what I mean by that is that usually we have two species that have diverged from a common ancestor. So, for example, this is what we call a phylogenetic tree or a cladogram. And it shows that the common ancestor of sharks and all the rest of these animals diverged from some time in the past here. And what made this particular radiation important is that right here was the evolution of the bony skeleton. So everyone in this group has a bony skeleton to the exclusion of sharks. You can go further down this tree here, and there's no directionality associated with this. It's just splitting events, but you can go down and say, okay, well, the evolution of 4 limbs happens at this junction. So everyone down here has 4 limbs to the exclusion of ray-finned fish and sharks, and so on and so forth. And so what I want to point out here right away is that the amniotic egg evolved right here at the divergence between crocodiles, dinosaurs, and birds on the one hand, and rodents, rabbits, primates on the other hand, and pretty much all mammals on this clade here. And so that settles definitively the question about which came first, the chicken or the egg. It's clear that the egg came before the chicken. And this is how scientists think about evolution. But more often than not, you've probably encountered evolution that looks like this, which is different. Because if you look at Pichu, Pikachu, and Raikou, you will see that there is a linear evolution event here, which means that one evolves into the next, then evolves into the next. And that is not how evolution works. Evolution works by splitting. So when we look at evolutionary relatedness, we're looking for those big traits that are present in one group and not present in another group to help us understand how species have radiated. So I think it's important then to focus narrowly on mammals and the differences between primates on the one hand, and we are part of the primate clade here, a group called hominids, or that include us and all of our fossil ancestors, and chimpanzees, I believe, are included in hominidae as well, our closest ancestor, to the exclusion of gorillas and orangutans, which are our next closest. So chimps and bonobos, our pygmy chimps, and humans and all of our fossil ancestors fall right here. We are different than this group called carnivora. So carnivora is actually an order of mammals that includes cats and dogs and bears and raccoons. We often use the word carnivore to refer to a meat eater, but that's not actually what the order Carnivora means. And I say that because there are members of the order Carnivora. For example, in the raccoon family, there is an animal called the kinkajou. Kinkajou is a really interesting raccoon relative, although if you ask Paris Hilton, it's a monkey and she loves it. She has one on her shoulder sometimes. If she's still relevant, I'm kind of dating myself with pop culture there a little bit. Nevertheless, not a primate. It is a carnivore, a member of the order Carnivora. It's a member of the family of raccoons. Procyonidae, we call that. But it doesn't eat meat. 98% of its diet is fruit, mangoes in particular. So carnivora doesn't necessarily mean that the animals are eating meat. What it means is they all are united by a common characteristic. And that characteristic that unites all of carnivora, there are several of them, but one of the most diagnostic is the presence of what's called a carnassial molar, or a molar that is shaped like a serrated knife, and it allows animals to slice through meat. But again, it doesn't mean you have to eat meat. It just means you're capable of slicing that meat pretty well if you have that, that particular trait. Primates do not have that. Primates are united by a whole suite of other characteristics that we're going to talk about in a minute. So within carnivora, there are two basic types. There's the feliformia, or the cat-like animals, and the caniformia, or the dog-like animals. So what we're interested in with regard to Chewbacca is whether or not he is more like a canid or more like a hominid, or in particular, whether he's more like a dog, more like a primate. So let's talk about the characteristics of dogs. So again, I talked about carnivorous characteristic being the one uniting character. The main uniting characteristic is the presence of a carnassial molar. I alluded to the fact that there are several others. For example, certain skull bones are fused in specific places among all members of carnivora. They all have a highly developed sense of smell, and this is important. They have non-retractable claws. Anyone who has a dog knows that the dog's claws aren't going to retract. Anyone who has a cat knows that the cat's claws come out at the worst possible time because they retract. Okay, so that's characteristics of dogs. Let's take a look at the characteristics of primates then. So primates have large brains relative to their body size. they have forward-facing eyes with overlapping visual fields, and we call that stereoscopic vision. So they're able to tell distance very well. They also have a reduced sense of smell. So unlike carnivora, or unlike dogs, which have a highly developed sense of smell, primates don't have that. They've traded it off. In fact, they've lost some of their sense of smell to enhance their forward-facing eyes and improve their vision. And then primates have nails instead of claws on all or most of their digits. Okay, so very different than dogs. So then the question is, what about Wookiees? Well, again, going back to trusty old Wikipedia, and also Animal Planet's animal icons. These are the two most important references in all of science, I think. This is what we can say about Wookiees. So dog-like characteristics are in yellow here. There's one, keen sense of smell. Primate-like characteristics are in red. So they have human-like bipedal locomotion, meaning they're walking around on two legs. Now, humans and their fossil relatives are the only primates that are habitually walking around on two legs. And so Wookiees sort of fall toward, are in line with the with a specific part of the primate group, but not all. But Wookiees have forward-facing eyes with stereoscopic vision, so they have overlapping visual fields, and they have great eyesight. And they have a large brain to body size ratio, which some have said represents or is correlated with high intelligence. We know they're intelligent. They can speak a number of languages that do not require vocal nuance, but they cannot speak Galactic Basic Standard, so they don't have human-like speech. I think that's important to know when we talk about chewing and swallowing, which we will in just a minute. Then, in addition to these dog-like and primate-like characteristics, we also know that Wookiees have disproportionately high strength for their body size. That is not necessarily a primate trait, although I was talking with a very famous paleontologist once who told me a story about an orangutan, a very sad story about an orangutan at the Cleveland Zoo. And this was back in the early 80s when not a lot of thought was being put into the kinds of structures that were housing animals at zoos. We have come a long way since then. And so this was a big sort of cinder block cage with bars in the front, but a hole at the top to an outside area. And this particular orangutan was morbidly obese, extremely obese. But because of the way orangutan muscles attach and because they're constantly climbing in trees, this orangutan was able to stick its finger into the opening and pull its entire body weight up by one finger, look around with its head, and then lower itself back down. So all of that is to say that even though primates don't necessarily have disproportionately high strength for their body size, orangutans, chimps, gorillas, they could all rip your arms off, so stay away. Last two things I want to point out about Wookiees, they have retractable claws. So unlike dogs that have non-retractable claws, they have retractable claws. Unlike primates, they have claws. And then finally, the last one is opposable thumbs. And we often think of opposable thumbs being a uniquely human characteristic or a uniquely primate characteristic. I'm here to tell you today that that is not true. Raccoons have opposable thumbs, and that's why raccoons will rule the earth after this pandemic, sadly. Okay, so these are what Wookiees look like. These are the characteristics that Wookiees have. So that brings us back to the question, how would Chewbacca eat a Chewbacca? Is he more dog-like or is he more primate-like? And I think the answer was pretty clear. He had more in common with primates than he did with dogs, even though he wasn't perfectly in line with what primates look like. So, incidentally, I should point out that that Wikipedia actually says that that Chewbacca was conceived of as a mix between dogs and primates, even though there are more primate characteristics than there are dog characteristics. And he was actually conceived of being Han Solo's flying mate, his co-pilot, because George Lucas had a dog named Indiana which is also a line from Indiana Jones and the Holy Grail, or whatever that name of that one was, the third one, where he says, "We named the dog Indiana," right? That George Lucas's dog was actually named Indiana. So shout out for the Hoosier State. And he was his co-pilot in his car all the time, sat in the front seat right next to him. So that's sort of the inspiration for Chewbacca. But knowing that Chewbacca is more primate-like than dog-like, there's still a question about how Chewbacca might eat a Chewbacca sandwich. So what you're looking at here is a diagram of the airway and the foodway of a human. And it's a cut right down sort of the center of the head, so that you're looking from the midline out at the side of the head. Okay, so it's cut in half, split open, and you're looking at the inside of the head here. And this is the oral cavity right here. This is the nasal cavity right here. This is where your COVID test is probing, if you get one. They stick a little thing up here, and they start tickling your nasopharynx, which is uncomfortable. It's also where flu tests go too, by the way, at least some flu tests. And what's important to know here is that the nasal cavity and the oral cavity converge in this region we call the pharynx, but the airway and the foodway cross over each other. And that is a recipe for disaster. That is a recipe for disaster because it's possible for you to aspirate food. Now, why we would be designed this way is a great question. I think the answer is clearly this is evidence that we weren't designed, but instead we evolved from not such great precursor models. So evolution doesn't work by creating new things de novo every generation. It works by tinkering on last year's model. So for example, if you look at a Ford Mustang from 1969 and you look at a Ford Mustang from 2020, they're not going to necessarily look the same, but you can actually step back through time and see where small modifications were made along the way, and then you can see how one is related to the other. That's kind of what we do with evolution when we look at traits and characteristics in species as well. Okay, so again, the airway and the foodway cross paths. That's terrible. Apparently, we didn't learn anything. When you cross the paths, bad things happen. And in this case, it's aspiration of food. So when you're eating and you're trying to swallow at the same time, or when you're swallowing, you can't breathe at the same time because you have to have this structure right here called the epiglottis cover over the airway so that the food will go down in the correct place, right? The air will come here and the food will go there. And so the epiglottis will cover that over and will allow you to not aspirate your food. This is an adult. When you are a baby, you look like this, actually, where you have the epiglottis contacting the soft palate in the back of your mouth. And by doing that, it actually seals off the airway from the foodway so that food can pass around the sides and air can go down and you can't aspirate food. So if you look at a baby that's nursing, a nursing baby can breathe at the same time that it swallows. A human cannot do that. So why is this important? We're going to go back for a second. Well, one of the advantages of having this descent of the larynx relative to the base of the skull that happens during growth, because again, babies don't have this, but as the neck grows, the larynx drops down in the neck relative to the base of the skull. That allows for very nuanced speech patterns to occur. We call them glottal speech. And so you can make sounds that you couldn't make if you didn't have a descended larynx. So based on the fact that Chewbacca cannot have human or does not have human-like speech patterns, it's safe to hypothesize that he might have an epiglottis that's locked up closer to his soft palate than he would if he was a fully adult human. However, because he has more primate characteristics than he has dog characteristics, and this would be more like a dog characteristic, maybe the jury is still out. All of this is to say that that I really didn't have a very fruitful thought experiment when I started giving this some thought over lunch. What I did have, however, was a fantastic sandwich from a fantastic food truck that I hope makes it through the pandemic. Well, I hope you've learned a little bit about evolutionary biology today, phylogenetics. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, You can follow me on Twitter at OregonJM or at SciComm Plus, which is the Public Library of Science communication blog that I am one of the co-editors of. I really appreciate your attention. I hope you enjoyed the talk.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. I always love learning more about Chewbacca every time, and the Pokemon throw in a lot of comments, people talking about Pokemon. So thank you so much, Jason. Thanks for everybody's comments and questions as we've gone through. Quick housekeeping thing that I remembered: don't forget to submit your tickets. So if you're in your Gen Con event page for this event, if you click give the host your tickets, this event's completely free. So there's no like worry about the funds not going in there, but it's good for housekeeping. So thank you very much for that in advance. Also, we had a question in the chat about where did you get your reasons, greetings, ugly sweater. We've got those on Teespring. I added the link to the chat, and that's just you can find it if you go to indianasciences.org/give. There's a list on there that has that. So those small housekeeping things aside, we're going to hop over to fantastic speaker Matt Sowers. Really fantastic talk, mechanical engineer, physics, D&D. We're going to keep that fantasy string going into this. So, I mean, I'm not going to talk too much. You guys don't want to hear from me. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt. Feel free to share your screen, and we'll keep this rolling. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks, and thanks for having me. I'm going to try to share my screen and see how this works. Or not. Share. Is it working? No.
It is not yet. So, yeah, if we click on just the green share screen button.
It needs permission. Hang on.
Oh, do we need to give you?
No, my app needs to give me permission.
Hey, there we go.
So that means I have to leave the meeting, or it's not working. Give me a sec.
Yeah. So I'll do my singing. I'll dance for a second. So that's the fun about doing the technology and the meetings. Sometimes we got to figure out how to get different apps and different things to connect. So I'll just hop back in for a second.
If only we had an engineer.
Hey, that's that's below the belt, Jason. Full disclosure, I am a computer engineer. So yeah, that's probably my department. But
you probably want to walk that back right about now.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so we're gonna get Matt. He's gonna exit out. He's gonna hop back in. Yeah. In the meantime, looking through the comments, we've had a lot of good questions and discussions around different around the different evolutions, Pokemon, different people in different areas, difference between adult and child Wookiees. A lot of really good, fantastic stuff in there. I've also had comments and stuff popping in through in Twitch and Twitter and YouTube, so we'll save those for the end. If you get a chance, follow us at Indiana Sciences. And it looks like Matt's back in here. We'll see if we can get connected. Shouldn't take more than just a minute. And then we'll be back up and rolling. And feel, we do have a hint from the comments. You have to put your phone in landscape mode to let it to go on, if that's the issue. So we will be rolling in just a second. We got some. Are you good, Matt? Negative.
Do you need to make him a co-host again?
Yes.
He's nodding his head.
Jason, can you make him co-host, please? That's
If I can find him, I will.
yeah. Thank you guys very much for your patience. Just a fun poll of the group is we got people in the group chat here. How have the technical difficulties, yes or no, happened in your previous Gen Con meetings? Give us in the comments if you've had those before. Hey, now we're cooking with fire. So we
I
see.
can speak. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Now I gotta do this thing. See if this works.
You are
Holy
golden, Matt.
mackerel.
It's all
Holy
you.
mackerel.
It's all you.
Holy crap. All right. Well, I am a professional and personal nerd. I am not a computer nerd. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. So clearly this isn't my fault. Just a quick splash screen of possibly relevant nerd cred. I played a pile of games for a really long ass time because I'm old and shit. And then we've been got the mechanical engineering degree at Purdue because, you know, we're Hoosier nerds. So go Hoosier powered nerds. I picked up a few patents along the way. I made some stuff. So you put that degree at least to good use for building things. So take that nerd interest that want to build things and some storytelling and just kind of steep that together. And that's how you become a professional and a personal nerd. So this inspired me then for tonight's talk, talking specifically about the physics of fantasy, looking at traps and role-playing games. So the thing is that they don't have to be hard, right? I mean, there's not a whole lot to it, and a lot of it's just gravity and some other stuff. So let's set up the scenario here for you, and we'll talk about this by providing an example, and we'll talk our ways through what we're looking at. So you carry on the trail of the assassins, fleeing town into the open rolling plains. Their trail follows a footpath over the next rise to a slight depression crossed with a deep holloway, with a large boulder on one side sticking up to the level of the surrounding landscape, its top flattened and scooped slightly to form a cairn, a channel cut in its face to lead the floor of the holloway, which disappears from sight as your approach doesn't let you see inside the holloway channel. As you circle around to peer down the holloway from either end, you can see the base of the cairn channel ends in an undercut where a thick oak barrel acting as a cistern rests wedged under it to collect rainwater. Across from it is an opening low and wide, leading to an underground cave structure. So let's take a look at this from a side view, and we'll take a look at what the adventurers see as they venture down from the top level here in towards the holloway, or should I say, I can turn my pointer on. From the top level here, as they walk around down into the holloway and find themselves faced with this, you see a low, wide cavern entrance hewn in the rock from human stone cutting tools. A rusty maul lays unused near the entrance, cast aside at the corner. The corridor is nearly 8 feet wide, maybe 7 feet tall, oval, slightly in cross section, with the middle tamped down from decades of use. The corridor slopes downward steadily past the limits of your sight. So as people are faced with this, they're not 100% sure what's going on. And the key is to leave people clues as to how they can discover things. So what I'm going to do is walk you through this in a way that the dwarf with stone cunning who sees this might be able to recognize what's going on. So it's just a freestanding rock. Clearly this is not a thing that's obvious to the rest of the party. They've got grasses that grow off the top around this holloway. There's maybe a bunch of birds' nests or something that's all jacked up back in here. And then there's this stone that's sitting kind of holding the weight of the thing with a fulcrum down here. So if anybody's had physics in high school, you can remember that I might be interested in the center of gravity of an object where its center of mass appears to be. If the center of mass is not right on the line of what's supporting it, if it's just off a bit, it tends to lean or could even fall over. So to keep that from happening, somebody might have just put a brace there that they didn't really want to draw everybody's attention to. So they put a barrel in the front here and maybe flatten the top of the stone and carve down the front of it, maybe. So it's covered in water and algae and is maybe slippery. In any case, there's an oddly located old mall just sitting here by the entrance. I wonder what that could possibly be for. And then as we peer down here, there's this strangely loose gravel all here on this tamped down path. And we can't see much further. Of course, there's more to come, but our intrepid heroes have yet to figure that out. So with our stone cutting, we can maybe see that this is actually a freestanding stone. And if that thing that's holding it up there was just gone, this thing would fall forward. Not only would it fall forward, but it'd be sliding on its front surface, which is, maybe covered in algae and slippery, or falls onto some loose gravel that's on a packed, well-worn path and allows this stone to fall in the way and, well, plug a hole. So if this is 6 to 7 feet across in an oval path, and this is maybe, I don't know, 10 feet tall, that sort of thing, it's a real heavy stone. I don't know exactly how heavy. I didn't actually do the math on it. I'm just going to go with real heavy. Heavy enough to trap people in there for a very long time. And of course, the last piece of this being that as this surface is laying down sideways and this is plugging this hole, if we were to tunnel underneath it, then as soon as we cleared the point where we might be able to dig out from around it or under it, it will just slip back down into the hole that we dug and crush whoever's digging out the hole underneath, while pinning the top firmer against the surface and wedging the thing in place. Now, traps have to be simple because, we don't want to be too difficult for everyone to figure out how it goes. So we'll write some rules in the background. And this is really important for those of you who are DMs who are watching this, or game masters, any role-playing game, and you want to do something devious, like sort of nearly kill the characters without actually killing them, or at least having them have the sensation of the fear of death. That's really all we're going for here. So if they look in the barrel, they'll notice a thick oak beam that's either in the barrel depths or behind it, wedged up against there. We'll use some 5th edition mechanics for those of my fellow 5th edition nerds in the audience, where we've got a DC 15. We can do some sort of investigation check or observation that we're going to see if we can figure this out, or maybe we're a dwarf with stone cutting. So you throw some experience at them. This is scaled for people who are 5th level at the time, so that it's really hard to do any sort of useful magic at level 5 that would get you out of this pickle. So it does pay attention, or it does pay to pay attention on the way in, and everybody should get experience for being subjected to something as horrific as this. Now, it's not really there to keep you in or to keep you out. It's more like to keep you in. So there's got to be some reason to want to go down there in the first place. We were following our assassins earlier and we watched them go down this tunnel. And we can't really see down here, but the further we get down, the closer we get to seeing there's some door here, this fascinatingly conspicuous door. And while this door is here, it's actually the door that we saw these guys go through. And a matter of fact, in the case where I used this for the campaign it was in, there's tunnels that go back there and some other features like barracks and stuff, but there's no other way out. This is a hole in the ground. So now we have the chance, as they begin to move forward 30 feet down the hallway, you spy an opening hewn from the corridor to your left, about 30 feet ahead. The sloping corridor ahead of you ends in a large round door of some 6 feet wide, with large iron hinges on the right and a heavy iron ring set on the left side of the door. So we have this door here. What we can't see is that there's a leather flap that's covering it, just right where a ballista bolt could come out. For those unfamiliar with siege engines of medieval times, a ballista is a giant crossbow, basically a horizontally laying bow that you use to energize a giant arrow. In this case, the big arrow is a ballista bolt, which is basically a spear. And it's about the size of a spear, and it would feel like a spear coming through you real fast. As far as siege engines go, it's probably one of the lighter and easier ones to move, considering its effect, which is why it's tucked down here at the bottom of a tunnel with this door over it and this little flap to allow the bolt to come through. Strung down along the floor then are a few iron rings with a tripwire that comes across the hall in and out of the page right where we're at here. And when they trip on the tripwire, which is under tension, that pulls the string all the way down here, which pulls the ratchet, and releases the trigger mechanism, thus causing the bolt to fly forward. When it does so, hooked up to the brace of the crossbow itself, as the bow part of it moves, that pulls a string, which drops this ring from here, and a bell hangs. So you can hear the bell go off. So there's a door alarm, which it's okay if people coming down the hallway see, but by the time they see the bell, generally speaking, it's real bad. So we have to give them a chance to get out of this. So they have to be able to see it, they have to be able to understand it. Let's take a look at what happens next. Oh, yeah. So here's how not to die. Um, as they advance down the corridor, it helps to have somebody with a pretty high passive perception or the ability to roll some perception dice. Or I always like to give people a test. As it turns out, nobody was really paying much attention coming down this hall, except for the druid saving the party there. Druid happened to say, "Hey, what's this tripwire doing here?" And they were like, "What? Wait, what? What tripwire?" So turns out that it would have been real bad. They continued sneaking down the hallway. The bad guys, of course, through this door, worked their way all the way down here, discovered the door. Once they got close enough, I give them another chance at that perception check. Then they can see the leather flap that's there, discover the trap. Now, in this case, there were bad guys in here, and they weren't sure what to do about the bad guys, and the bad guys were coming. So they quickly opened the door, jumped in here, and everyone was kind of standing around the entire area where the crossbow, or excuse me, where the ballista was. One of the bad guys came walking up the tunnel, and they just pulled the trigger and shot him in the back. So, I mean, sometimes you get to do that. Plus, you get the experience for figuring out how to disarm it, and of course, discovering it and that sort of thing. So, there's not any hard and fast rules about how to set up things, but the key is keeping it simple. I didn't have to do any math to figure out how to set this thing up, and there's rules that already exist that tell me how to, what's the sorts of things that I need to shoot a ballista. That exists in a book somewhere, so I don't really have to like figure that out for the world that this game is supposed to be played in. However, I do need to understand a little bit about the physics that says, for the short distance I need this to fly, it's going to move in a straight line. I, for previous reasons, wanted a downhill slope in the first place. This downhill slope is a little bit disorienting, and of course, as you're maybe only 6 feet tall or even 5 feet tall hallway here, people are kind of bent over and crouched together single file. So whoever's up front is definitely going to have a bad day. So with that in mind, I wanted to show you the overall scene as it was when these players walked across it and they saw somebody come running down the holloway and run into this tunnel here. So they cautiously came down and kind of took all this in. The warlock of the party actually happened to have a immovable rod with him and laid the immovable rod in the groove on the front of this and set it frozen there so it would hold the rock in place in case they needed to leave. And of course, the bad guys know that if there's somebody that gets shot down here, they can dispatch somebody down in this area. They can run out, grab them all, knock the log out of the way, and then the plug falls in there, trapping whoever's in there long enough that they might not be able to dig themselves out of this stone without having any stone cutting tools on them. And surely they didn't leave any in their hideout. So a few key takeaways I'd like to at least cover here. The first one is that gravity pulls down all the time, whether you want it to or not. Um, and players always need to be aware of that. Use that to your advantage. If you're trying to figure out, some way of dealing with players that you want to put their characters through a little bit of fear, in a completely uncontrollable matter. It's can you think your way through a puzzle? Give them a puzzle to solve. And gravity is one of my favorite things to do. It's rock climbers that will tell you that going up is generally pretty safe. And of course, spelunkers, or should I say cavers, will tell you going down is generally very dangerous because you can jump down to a place that you cannot climb out of, but you can generally always fall off of a thing you can climb on top of. So with that in mind, the most horrifying traps I can always think of are generally underground, and that's a great place to put them. Use gravity, put them at the bottom of a hole, that kind of thing. The second thing is that springs are great until they aren't, until they fail. Generally speaking, in the case of a ballista, yeah, they're going to have to service that thing and keep it paid attention to because the string will stretch, the material will go after a while. Not that it's super important for your campaign or whatever, but the fact is This isn't the sort of trap that's going to sit around for centuries, you know, for them to discover in this ancient temple that's protected by all these ancient traps of whatever culture was previously there. That's all going to have to be like moving stone stuff or whatever. Think I guess Indiana Jones. It's another Indiana Jones reference. Why not? So then I would say the key behind devising traps that are interesting is that players are curious. So you should reward them for curiosity, reward them for discovery, reward them for figuring things out. I know that's not physics lessons, but that's good gaming right there is what that is. You know, if you're a game master, always give them something for being curious, give them something for discovering things, and give them something for figuring it out. And they, you know, they won't necessarily get all the things. They might not figure it out. They finally put the whole trap together after they had gone down here and shot, you know, opened this door, and they're like, what the hell's a ballista doing back here? And there's like a dude coming out. They're like, oh yeah, that's not great. So they figured it out very quickly. So um, when you come at this, don't be afraid to try all sorts of different stuff when you're designing this stuff, right? So your knowledge of science currently surpasses that of most folks about 500 years ago, which is where all this technology is coming from. So if you're sticking to that level of technology, you have a really good shot at coming up with some very clever stuff that people haven't seen before. The biggest problems with, you know, traps and traps compendiums are there things that people can read. So it's cool to look at it for ideas and then see just how dangerous some of the old stuff is, especially the old Mike Stackpole Grimtooth traps were just, you know, murder on a stick. So in any case, um, keep it fair and keep it fun is always part of traps too. Make stuff not instantly deadly if you can avoid it, and if it is dangerous, then it's, you know, you're just trying to kill them. But you know, dangerous if they do stupid things. That's fair. That's fair. Give them a trap. I gave him one at one point that was actually like the key to kind of solving the trap was in a puzzle written in, you know, some language all the way around the room that they could read. So they like read it once, and then like the dude who could read it all was like, I'm gonna go check out this shiny thing in the middle of the room and start messing with it. And sure enough, that was the wrong thing to do. So had they taken the time to look around, they could have figured it out. But that was on them. They deserved what they got. In any case, I hope you had a good listening to the talk here. I wanted to give a special shout out to Indiana Sciences for keeping it real here for Gen Con. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and I hope you have all a good evening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. That was fantastic to watch and listen to. A lot of really good comments in the chat, especially a lot of shout outs to druids and healers and people that keep parties alive, which I think we can all respect that.
Wizmods rule.
Yeah. So I've got a lot of questions that we've pulled out here from the different chats. And I think the first ones I'm going to toss out are for Jason, if you're up for them.
Sure.
Jason, so one of the ones I'm going to kind of looking at this. It says, okay, so from Jin, he says, looking at Chewie's eyes, they seem to be arranged more like a primate's than like a dog's. I guess speak a little bit more on that about the eye placement and the difference between the different species.
Sure. So, so as one of the participants actually noted, dogs do have stereoscopic vision as well as primates, but the quality of that stereoscopic vision is actually lower than it is in primates. So that's one of the hallmarks of primate evolution is the evolution of very acute, sort of closely placed eyes that allow overlap in visual fields. If you have eyes that are placed out toward the side of your head, the visual fields won't overlap. So if you think about a horse, right? The horse can look this way or that way, but not really that way so well with both of its eyes at the same time. And so the visual fields don't overlap, and it doesn't allow them to have quite the depth perception that we do. It also allows them to get distracted by other things. So if you think of racehorses, I don't know why I think of racehorses, but you know, they put blinders over their eyes so that they will continue running down in a straight direction, which is just different than than what a primate has, where the eyes are much closer together, and therefore the visual fields can overlap, and you can actually look with your right eye over to the left and look with your left eye over to the right, and see that three-dimensional space a lot better. And so that's sort of what is characteristic of primate vision, which is a little bit different. That, and also color vision in some species is different than it is in dogs. And the amount of color that is able to be seen is different. And it's actually a really fascinating area for research that actually is happening at Dartmouth. So James might actually know a little bit more about that. There's a guy named Nate Dominy up there who is very much plugged into that research. It's fascinating stuff.
Very cool. Very cool. Couple of there's one or two questions, housekeeping questions. Are the themes the same between tonight and tomorrow? Just as another shout out, the next meeting, which will be tomorrow night at 7 p.m., has a completely new panel, completely different topic. It'll be all about zombies, which will be a lot of fun. We have the anatomy of zombies from an amazing professor. She's from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. And then we have the wonderful author, scientist, Dr. Bill Sullivan. We'll be talking about mind control in nature. And then finally, an amazing electrical engineer, a professional engineer from here in Indianapolis, Rachel, will be talking about what happens to the electrical grid during an apocalypse, especially a zombie apocalypse. And it's going to look a lot different than you see in the shows, right? And it's actually, I won't spoil anything, but if you think that could happen, maybe check in and learn what that's going to be like. So another question I think that was for me is, am I any relation to Zephram Cochrane? Not yet. He would be born in the future. So maybe my son, I don't know. I haven't done very much time traveling yet. So hopping into more serious questions though, I'm actually going to throw another one back at you, Jason. It looked like this question. So the question kind of generic, but the question was, is Chewbacca a baby from the traits that you're kind of saying? Is he like a younger one of his species? I'll toss that one back over to you.
So my understanding is Chewbacca is quite elderly, at least according to lore. So I would say no. However, he also throws temper tantrums. So maybe he's a baby. I'm not sure. But it's a great question, actually. I think what it means is that Chewbacca may have, assuming any of this is real, Chewbacca may have a vocal apparatus that looks more like what we would have seen in earlier human species like Neanderthals, where they didn't have a fully descended larynx, and therefore they weren't capable of making the same sounds, all of the same sounds that modern humans are capable of. And frankly, I am not capable of making many of the sounds that are made in sub-Saharan Africa, for example. But that's only because I haven't learned how to do it. It's not because I have vocal apparatus that won't allow me to do it. Chewbacca would have vocal apparatus that probably would prevent him from being able to do that. And so I think he's probably an adult, an elderly one at that, with a childish mentality, incapable of modern human speech. So, maybe he lived in the White House.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, I like it. So one of the things I wanted to share as I was looking through, and thanks for everybody as we were having the technical difficulties. One of these ones we were asking, what things have you run into through your seminars, that you've seen? And one of them, I listened to somebody's air conditioner for, well over an hour. I like this one here is in a meeting and the presenter started to loop and just repeated the same thing over and over again. Thank you guys. That cheered us up. That made us feel good. The next question, I'm not sure if it's more a thought experiment or more of a technical question. You can take it either way, Matt. But looking at getting trapped in that tunnel, when you got trapped in, what about ignoring the door, which seems to obviously be a trap, and trying to dig, up through the ceiling? What are your thoughts on that?
I had originally made the whole thing out of stone. So if you can dig through stone with what you brought with you, absolutely. If you brought a pickaxe, man, there's people who can be like, I got this bag of holding. I put a step ladder in there. I'm not going to say that that's anybody I've gamed with or not, or that Rufus and I have gamed with on Wednesdays. Anyway, but whatever you want to bring with you. If they happen to have that stuff with them, that's great. But they were also like level 5, so stuff like meld stone or all the other spells that are normally available for things like teleportation and that sort of thing. That's not in the inventory. So I was like, at this point, this is a basically deadly trap. Now, it would have killed them very slowly. They would have died of thirst longer than anything. So they had plenty of time to figure it out and maybe come up with a better solution, dig through their packs. I don't know. I think they had like possibly one way out, but somebody knew where they were going and where the trail was, so somebody might have eventually found them. I don't try to just bury them in a rock-a-lanche or something like that. That's not fun times for anybody, where the DM's just like out to murder you. I'm out to help you tell a story, and sometimes the environment in which the story is being told is pointy and dangerous.
Nice. I like it. Looking down through the questions, another housekeeping question: is this being recorded for future viewing? Yes. So if you go to @Indiana Sciences on our Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, this will be recorded and you can rewatch it. I know we had a lot of applause for the way that the trap was designed. People were interested, in that thought process. So you can come back and view that when you start to design your traps. On the trap thing as well, I saw a shout out. I'm really glad my brother isn't watching this because he doesn't need any help figuring out how to kill my characters. And I can appreciate that. I've been in those campaigns, which just seem like an episode of Saw or something, trying to figure out, how to kill the characters. I'm going to hop down for another question here. Where are we? There we go. Biology inquiry. What phenotypic traits would you expect Quirians to have? That assumes you have any experience in the Mass Effect intellectual property. So if someone has experience, maybe wants to explain a little bit, or if Ben, who the question's from, if you want to go off mute and kind of fill in your question. I don't know. Have you played the Mass Effect games, Jason?
I have not, so I'm not even really sure what the question is, but I'm looking for Ben so that I can unmute him because I think we control that.
Oh, hey, that's hi-oh.
Let me see. This would be
Ben White.
Ben White. Okay, let's see. Ben White, I'm going to unmute you. Maybe. There we go. Whoop. Did you get it?
I think so.
All right.
There we go.
Okay.
So the Quarians.
Oh
yeah. So the Quarians in the world are just like the masked suit race. So we don't get to know anything about them except that they have 4 fingers or 4 digits. They don't have a 5th opposable thumb. But we also know that they lived on a planet that was filled with plateaus and that they carried like grass seeds with them. So there's a lot of fan theories about what they might look like under their suits, but of course the primary publishers of the IP just leave it as a mystery to be explored later.
Yeah, I say contact them. I have no idea. Honestly, it's a great question. I don't know what that phenotype might look like. I can give you an example of a primate that has 4 digits. And when I say 4 digits, I mean 4 digits that are actually external. The but they actually have 5 digits on their hands, and those are spider monkeys. Spider monkeys live in Central and South America. They are large-bodied primates, so they're 14, 15 kilos, I think, maybe larger than that. They are prehensile-tailed, so they can suspend from their tails. But one of the things that they do that is different than other primates in the region is they brachiate. They hand over hand, fly through the trees, and so they've got hands that are adapted for really clawing over branches. So they have a thumb bone that's thumb bones that are inside the skin still, but their 4 external digits on each hand are really highly attuned to wrapping around branches, and so they can easily hand over hand fly through it. They assist themselves with their tails, so they look a lot like a gibbon in that regard, except the gibbons don't have tails at all. And so they do what's called ricochetal brachiation. So they like ricochet off of branches, and they can fly through. The other thing that's cool about them is that when you get a group of them together and they're calling, they sound like horses. They whinny. It's crazy. It's really one of the coolest sounds I've ever heard in the rainforest. That is so, but they are not seed eaters. They are fruit eaters. So the only example I can think of a primate that has only 4 digits, 4 external digits, really is really that, right? Spider monkey. So I don't have a good phenotype for you. You said they were walking around on 2 legs. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, the big debates are they a downy bird or are they more mammalian? And so grasses would get caught in either the down or get caught in the fur and then be carried with them as they traipsed up and over these plateaus and descended to the other side.
So I think maybe a better question is less about the phenotype and more about what are the symbionts that they're living with, right? What is it about those grasses, or what is in those grasses that they need that needs help being spread around, whether it's through downy fur or not, right? Or downy, what you said, downy feathers, is that right?
Yeah, either downy feathers or like short fur or something like that.
Right. So that would be a really interesting question. I can't tell you though what they might look like phenotypically. Actually, you've given me more answers about what they look like phenotypically than I've given you. Excuse me. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. But can you put the name of that game in the chat, because I want to look this up.
Can I throw a confounding variable in here real quick?
Please, yeah, James.
Yeah, so I'm looking at a picture. They appear to be digitigrade and walking. They appear to have very short tibia and extremely extended metatarsals, and that makes me think that in this world, I think they're from Rylock. That could be different. That's actually Star Wars. They're from something. I would think they're avian, right?
Well, they could be mammalian. I mean, there are lots of digitigrade mammals. Primates are not one of them. We're plantigrade, palmigrade animals, which means, so digitigrade means they're walking on the tips of their toes, versus plantigrade or palmigrade, walking on the soles of their hands or the soles of their feet or the palms of their hands. You said they had a short tibia, but elongated what? Metatarsals?
Metatarsals, yeah.
Okay, so that to me, that's an elongation issue. So they're evolved for cursorial locomotion. They're evolved to run. That's what you see in horses. That's what you see in giraffes, all sorts of animals that evolved to run. So dogs even, they have elongated, although it's not quite as elongated, not quite as specialized as you find in bovids, cows, horses, things like that. Cool. Thank you for throwing that in the chat. So yeah, ostrich, yes, very much ostrich. They are evolved for running. That's true. They're certainly not evolved for flying. So, or if they are, they did a very poor job of it.
Oh, great question, Ben. Thank you so much for that. Now, one of the things that just popped up in the chat here, that if you've seen the new His Dark Materials series on HBO, there might be a spoiler coming up for the new season that has been spoiled, that's coming up. But there is a species in the amber spyglass that uses basically these large seeds They hook their claws into them and use them for locomotion. They roll these seeds under them, kind of like large wheels, because on this, I don't want to spoil stuff, but they're older books. The planet has evolved with these long tracks that are kind of like highways, right? And so a certain animal has developed the ability to hook into these large seeds and use them kind of like wheels to locomate. And Christine writes, the Malufa are somewhat elephantine in nature, but are described as having a diamond-shaped spinal base because they have single front-back legs and a pair of middle legs with claws that are used to hook into a seed pod and then wheel around. So this may be half cryptid, half anatomy. I'm thinking dung beetles rolling around on things, but I'm going to leave this to the experts. I'm a lowly computer engineer. What do you guys have for that one? They're just not coming off mute. They said, "Man, this one's too hard."
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that. I really don't. I mean, I'm looking at pictures here too, and that's the beauty of all of this, right? So like everything that James and I talked about, but especially me, operates under this principle of uniformitarianism. And that's the idea that things happened in the past the same way they happen now, or actually the other way around. Things happen now the way they've happened in the past. And so we can actually look at what's happening now and infer what's happened in the past. Extending that, the principle of uniformitarianism to other planets is tenuous, but that's what we've done, or at least I've done. I don't mean to implicate you, James. And so all of the rules are kind of thrown out, I think, when you start messing around with other planets and other non-human life forms. So I think that's the beauty of evolution. It's not predictable.
Yeah, that's a good one of those the science answers, right? Of like, hey, let's don't know what we don't know. Different initial conditions rise to different processes. Kaboom, right? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We got about 5 minutes left because we want to make sure you guys can hop over to your next series. First off, I just want to say again, thank you all so much for joining us. I think we probably have time for one more question. And I think, James, I'm going to toss this to you. I saw a question fly by about the Loch Ness Monster and the reality behind that one, the possible reality. Since we're going to have a speaker from Edinburgh, Tawara, do you just want to hit on a real quick back for the Loch Ness Monster on the cryptids?
Yeah.
That's kind of yeah.
So, do you want like the real answer or the imaginative, like what could it be?
Let's just crush the dreams and go right to the real one.
So
that's what
the Loch Ness Monster is like an amazing marketing strategy, especially now that we've come out to see that every piece of the mythos of the Loch Ness Monster has been fabricated, from the initial photograph to the flipper tracks that were found. Like every piece of it has been debunked. However, Inverness is great. Like Loch Ness is cool. It's creepy. And you could absolutely foresee something like that happening. And really quickly, there was a study that was sent out to a bunch of scientists. Do you believe Loch Ness or Bigfoot? Check one or the other or neither. Most scientists just kind of threw it away and didn't answer at all. The ones that did respond, I think it was like 2% said Bigfoot could totally exist. But like 30% were like, the ocean's huge. Water's deep. We don't know that much about it. We found giant squids. We found oarfish. That could possibly happen. But it's still like a small amount. But the Loch Ness Monster is fake. In Vermont, totally.
That last part, we lost you for a second.
Sorry, I was just talking about the benevolent overlord we have in Lake Champlain, Champ, the friendly sea monster. Totally
gotcha.
real.
I love how the answer, I watched faces in the crowd as she started with the absolutely not. And half the faces went, oh yeah. And half the faces went, no, what? That's so I love we brought it back. And we got to an answer there. So I just want to say again, we got about 60 seconds here. I'm going to share screen real quick and just say thank you all so much for joining this. This has been absolutely fantastic to have all of you along, have all of your questions. Feel free. I've added the Twitter tags for everyone, James Reed, Jason Organ, and Matt Sowers. If I got yours wrong, yell at me. I just put the one that I thought we could use because I don't know the other one. But feel free to reach out. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure you turn in your tickets. And yeah, have a great evening. Follow us at Indiana Sciences. Thank you everybody so much for joining. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. Oh, I'm not muted.